Hey everybody, it's Romania Black. We're on episode 10, right? Yeah, of My Hero Academia Season 5, That Which Is Inherited. Ooh, I'm so excited. These Class 1A versus Class 1B matches have been really good from start to finish. But honestly, the battle of Todoroki and Ida's group and then Bakugo's group, it just keeps ramping up. And of course, we're on Deku's group now, which is our main one. And it's Shinso's time to shine with Class 1B. So I feel like everything in this first half of the season is leading up to Deku's match here. And I'm really excited by it. So, the animation the last couple of episodes, some people have been commenting on YouTube and Patreon about it. But yeah, when Bones decides that it wants to go all in, they're like, we're gonna go all in, and which is great. In the last few episodes, there's been like moments where the animation has just been amazing, and I've been really, really excited by it. So I'm really curious to see what all happens this episode. I know spoilers from the manga, but again, like I've said in some previous reactions, I haven't gone back and reread the manga until after I watched the episodes. So I'm trying to piece together what happens, and then afterwards I'll go back and read it, and then we'll have our discussion, and then we'll do our spoiler discussion. But I'm really, really excited because I think things are going to happen, but I'm not sure. But it's going to be fun to see it animated. It really is. And so I'm so excited. And the thumbnail has Monoma. Oh, I love Monoma. A lot of people think he's annoying. I'm like, no, he's Class 1B's Bakugo. He gets more and more erratic and chaotic as the season has gone on. And I love it. Kendo just has to karate chop him and take him out. So I'm excited, y'all. I can't wait. But yeah, there's not much preface. Last week's match was just a one and done, one episode. We're done with it. End of story. So excited. So yeah, we're going to see what happens, right? But we're going to dive in to episode 10 of season 5 here, That Which Is Inherited. We're going to start that episode here in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Okay. Oh. Man, that episode ended a lot faster than I anticipated. I did not, it was just suddenly over, and I was like, and towards the end of it, I was like, is it really already at the end? Because it seems like it's leading us up to like the right before the episode end moments. And I'm like, oh crap, but what a really good episode. So yeah, I'm just gonna go through this without the sound on. I'm obviously gonna be doing a spoiler corner at the end of this discussion, but man, just right from the get-go, just fast-paced. And I like that Deku's group was kind of taking a similar approach to Bakugo, just dive right in, but dissimilar to Bakugo's team. Deku's like, I'll be the bait, and we'll lure them out to get me, and that'll help you guys, because Shinso is the factor that's the problem in this battle. Shinso being able to do the brainwashing and manipulate people's voices, that's the problematic element in all this. And Deku's like, if we could draw them out using me, then that's going to be helpful. And I like that Monoma instantly tries to make this connection with Shinso. And I think that's really important because Monoma, you can tell, kind of gravitates towards Shinso because he's like, both of us have quirks that people don't expect heroes to use. And it's like, oh, and that's kind of sad because I'm like, Monoma's quirk is to copy people. Like, that seems like it'd be a great quirk for a hero to have. So it's kind of sad that he's been berated, but he's kind of like, or maybe it's like a villainous, Shinso has a quirk that people say would be a great quirk for a villain, and Monoma has a quirk that people have doubted would be good for hero work. So I like that Shinso tries to create that bond with Shinso, and Shinso doesn't quite know what to do with that. He's like, I don't know. And then, oh god, Deku, I felt for him this episode because he's like, I've been building up this whole time and trying to control my powers, and I've been building up to 20%. I've been working so hard to get my quirk under control so it's not hurting me, and then it just erupts. Like, this power from this vestige just erupts out of him. So, yes! We can talk about this now, because it's not a spoiler, but the user of Black Whip the quirk, which it always seems to make sense. Ever since we've seen that there's these vestiges inside of Deku, it's like, okay, so is he going to gain control of these quirks? And it goes back to the OP where him and Shinso there. So it's like, is he going to gain power over these quirks? And that looks to be the case. So Before we're talking more about Black Whip, I have to reference Tartarus because we're cutting back to it now with All for One. It's very creepy and coincidental that after all this stuff is awakening within Deku, that All for One starts to hear his brother's voice. And it's like, because if you think about it, the quirk that All for One gave the brother, the quirk, the stockpile quirk. So he's connected. I wonder if he's connected to the other people he's given quirks to, All for One. I have to save that comment for later to talk about it. But I wonder if he's connected. So he says he hears his brother's voice. So it's like the quirks inside Deku and the power of One for All inside Deku is manifesting. And he's like, I hear the memories made my body ache. And All for One says, I heard my brother's voice. And it flashes back to him giving the brother the quirk. And his face looks eerily human in that close-up. Like, you can kind of see the nose, but it's all burned away. And it's like, it's so creepy. All for One is so creepy. And just that shot, bleh. But yeah, so we have Black Whip. We have Black Whip, which is one of the user's quirks. And he says that Deku's going to gain the ability of the other quirks. Which we know that Toshinori, All for One, or All Might did not have a quirk originally. Nana gave him her One for All. So he didn't have a quirk originally, and Deku didn't have a quirk. And then you have the first brother. So those are 3 of the 9, and then you have the 6 others. So the user of Black Whip is saying that you're going to gain the 6 other quirks, because the younger brother didn't have a quirk, or he thought he didn't, but his quirk was to pass on quirks. So it's like, it's a weird quirk that doesn't really have any utility, but he's kind of like, okay, Deku, you're going to get 6 quirks to use through this awakening. And we've talked so far in this show about the whole singularity theory, and that being brought up with quirks, is that as quirks mutate and as they're passed on from generation to generation, we think of it biologically, like children-wise, you pass it on to your kids, and those quirks start to mix and intermingle, and the solidarity theory is that eventually a kid's going to be born with a quirk that'll instantly kill them because they can't handle the power of it. And that's kind of what's happening with Deku. Deku, even though it's not a biological thing, these aren't kids upon kids, but it's like you've genetically passed this quirk on person to person, and it's picked up these other quirks and mingled and gotten stronger and stronger, because the user says, Black Whip is much stronger now because it's gone through 8 cycles of power, and now it's gone to you, and it's much stronger than it was with me. So that's kind of terrifying, because Deku has a very brittle body. So it's like Deku's been working hard to not hurt himself, and now here comes this theory that, well, these quirks are going to hurt you more, so hope your arm's healed up. But oh my gosh, this episode was really, the animation, some moments of this episode, like when Deku was spiraling out of control, it's kind of like body horror. Like it was kind of him not being able to control it. And then the expressions that they gave Deku in these moments, like you could see the fear and terror in Deku's face. Like, I don't want my powers to hurt anyone. And since he can't control it, he doesn't know what's going to happen. And then that shot of when he notices that Ochaco was injured, he's like, oh my god. And then we don't get to savor it because Mona was like, we still got a battle to do. And, ugh. And you could tell when All Might's like, stop the fight. Like, All Might's worried for Deku's sake. But Aizawa's like, no, he's got it under control now, it looks like. We're going to keep it going, because Aizawa's thinking of everybody else in Shinso. And, man. I still don't understand with Monoma the clocks. He's got 5 minutes, so maybe he can steal up to so many quirks. He can't use them both at the same time, but he can steal so many quirks and then use them interchangeably for 5 minutes at a time. Maybe that's what the clocks are for. Because I'm guessing he stole the other 3 individuals, their quirks, and he was deciding when he was going to use them. And he decided to use Poltergeists first. Which I totally got that wrong. I thought her quirk was like a snow-based quirk. No, it's that she's like has telekinesis. And then you have the guy that can make things impact twice as hard. And then you have the girl that looks like a pit crew member that can make things bigger or smaller. So very functional quirks, kind of like with Mina, Mineta, and Ochaco. I love that we get the little flashback of Ochaco too, that we see this idea. We had this in Bakugo's Brawl, and we have this in this episode. The idea of, as a hero, what is your role? What do you do? And we had that with Ida as well. Like, Ida had to struggle with the idea of, okay, I'm a hero. what do I do? Am I someone that takes down the villains? Am I someone that saves people? And Ida's like kind of compromises. He's like, yeah, I can take down villains, but my function is I can move extremely fast. I can rescue people and help them in that way. And I think Ochako's kind of in the same boat as Ida. She's like, my quirk is helpful against villains, but also it's to save people. And I love the concept that Ochako talks about. Like, we think of heroes helping the common people that can't save themselves. But she's like, who saves the heroes? And it's like, ah, oh, that's such a good line. Like, who's the heroes that save each other? And she's like, I have this power. I can use it to help Deku and save him. And I love that. And I wonder if later on that's going to come back, because I ship Deku and Ochako. I do. I think that this is a good episode of them. And she kind of gets to demonstrate her abilities in that how they can help people. And I think Ochako and Ida are kind of in the same boat where they can save people. Their powers are most suited for saving people and rescue operations. Like, her powers and Ida's quirk are most suitable for that. Whereas Deku, his quirk is kind of destructive, like Bakugo's, and Todoroki's. So it's more apt for fighting villains and getting them under control than it is actually saving people, as far as we know. But and I'll talk more about that in the spoiler corner. But yeah, I didn't realize Monoma's hero name was Phantom Thief. I love that because it kind of like just steals people's quirks. I like it. And I like that it's Poltergeist that he uses in this chapter. But yeah, the animation, and I like that Shinso gets a taste of when things go wrong, what do we do? Because Shinso's expression through most of this was like, he was just in shock, like, this wasn't part of the plan. What do I do now? Because with the first battle Shinso was in, they had a clear-cut plan, and things may have, deviated away from that plan, but Shinso was able to cover it because it wasn't something drastically unpredictable. And whereas here, it was a very unpredictable situation, and Shinso's like, oh shit, what do I do? And then Ochako had to be like, hey, you've got a quirk, use it now. And he's like, oh yeah. And I like that it's fighting. He's like, Deku, let's fight. And it kind of snaps Deku out of that moment of panic where he's like, okay, yeah. And that's what activates it. I find it interesting that in the quirk vestige world, Deku doesn't have a mouth. He only has like his hand and the upper part of his head. Like, he can't speak. It's like he's not fully there, and that kind of ties to him being at 20% now. Because even the first user, the younger brother of All for One, says, "Oh, you're only at 20%. This is all you can see for now." So that makes sense. So I'm like, once Deku gets to like 100%, is he just going to be naked? Is he just going to be naked in the world? And which the other vestiges have clothes, so they get to keep their clothing. Why not Deku? I don't know, but I like that fact that the one vestige, he's like, can't you speak? Oh, okay, well then let me just monologue to you if you can't respond to me. But I love the concept of Black Whip. Like something that's, because his normal power is just shoot energy, and this is like an actual functional utility thing that's kind of reminds me of Sero and Spider-Man. It has a very like moving from place to place kind of utility to it. All Might's clearly freaked out about this situation because All Might didn't have any experiences like this, so I'm sure he doesn't know exactly what to tell Deku, And Bakugo was like, what the heck is this nonsense? And so Bakugo doesn't want to admit it, but he does care about Deku, so he's freaking out, being like, excuse me? So yeah, I like that they didn't just stop the match and just cancel the whole thing, because I feel like in earlier seasons they might have done that, but Aizawa was like, no, we've got this under control. We're all here if we need to be. Monoma, dude, savage manipulator. Like, Monoma, not only is his ability, I think, good for being a hero, but he was savage this episode. Like, he knows exactly the right words to trigger people. And that makes sense, because Monoma this whole time has been a very annoying character, and he's been, like, taunting and teasing people. But in this case, it's effective. Like, he's effectively drawing Deku out. Like, he baited Deku and reeled him in. And he knew in that conversation with Shinso earlier, he was like, Shinso, how did you get Deku to speak? And Shinso's like, well, I didn't really know him, so I just talked about one of his classmates. And that seemed to work. And Monoma is smart. He's perceptive. And he picked up on that and was like, oh, Deku, let me talk about one of your friends. What about Bakugo? You're around him a lot. It is Bakugo's fault that All Might lost his power. And I'm like, that is like I'm watching Free at the same time. That's some Hiyori level savage, like, how dare you, sir, speak about that? Like, that's a tender subject, sir. And he, like, pretty freaky stuff. And Shinso's face, I'm rewatching the episode, Shinso's face when Deku's like, get back, run, I can't hold this power pack. And Shinso's like, crap, what do I do? Like, this, I don't know how to help you, man. But I feel like I want to. The voice actor for Deku did a really good job this episode, like, conveying that pain and that, like, panic. Like, that was really, really well done. But, man, what a fast-paced episode. Lots of stuff happening. Lots of stuff happening. So I am pretty excited. I've got spoilers to talk about, and we will talk about it, but yeah. So I guess we've still got the match going on next episode. We've still got the match in episode 11 leading up, and the core with Deku and Shinso meeting each other. It now makes a lot more sense, right? Because this is all the coalescing into the climax of this first half of the season. We shall see. So I hope you enjoyed this reaction, but I do have things I want to talk about in the spoiler discussion that we shall get to. But in any case, I hope you all have a good week. If you're not sticking around for Spoiler Corner, I hope you have a good week. Take care, and I'll talk to y'all next week with more My Hero Academia. Oh, we covered a lot of ground this episode. I'm so glad we finally can talk about Black Whip. I'm so glad we're getting into this, because that's been the hardest part this season. Is like, that's been the hardest part going. That's what I've been fearing the most, is that I can't talk about Deku and the other quirks because it's spoilers, and now we're finally getting into being able to talk about it. It's like, oh, thank you, Horikoshi. So yes, we covered a lot of ground this episode, more than I thought we would. I really thought that this episode, going back and reading it, the pacing kind of makes sense, because these chapters are very fast-paced in the manga, and there's a lot of stuff happening, but it all happens very quickly, and there's lots of double spreads, and there's lots of spaced-out things. So we actually covered 4 chapters in this. We covered the last 2 pages of 209. We covered 210, 211, 212, and 213. So we covered 4 chapters, which, when we get into some later chapters, it may slow down a bit again, but this has been the most content we've covered in an episode so far this season has been this episode. And there were some things reworked, some different pacing things reworked from the manga, but honestly, one, there wasn't anything left out of those chapters. It was the full chapters. A lot of it was action shots, which is why we covered 4 chapters. I don't feel like anything was truly rushed per se. I think that if you'd drawn it out anymore, it might have seemed drawn out. Like, the first part of the season has seemed kind of drawn out in places, and this episode, it was just boom, boom, boom. The other thing is that not only was everything included in this, my mind has gone blank, but there was a lot of things were reworked. What I was going to say was, I liked how this anime handled the content of the chapters actually better than the manga itself. The manga itself, it breaks in weird places because it's a chapter of Shonen Jump, and they have to cut it they have to leave us with a cliffhanger, so they cut at certain times. But since this is one episode of the anime, it all was kind of put together in a way that I think it flowed better in the anime than it does in the manga. Those 4 chapters of the manga are kind of piecey because they're like 4 cliffhangers in a row, whereas this, everything could kind of flow better because there was only one cliffhanger at the end, and that's that the match is continuing. Oh, I kept wanting to say Banjo, who is the user of Black Whip. I kept wanting to say his name in the spoiler, and I was like, in the regular discussion, I'm like, no, don't reveal his name yet. It's Banjo. Banjo is the Black Whip user. That was really good. I will say, though, and I've included a panel of it here, of when Deku is about to be rescued by Ochaco and leading up to it. The body horror that Horikoshi does in these chapters, especially 212 and 211, it's like it's straight up body horror. Like, Deku is saying that it hurts. It's like coming out of his body. It's all over the place. Like, it's kind of scary, this power, when you don't know what it is. And Deku's like saying, it hurts me. I'm physically injured. Like, it hurts. Like, it's usually with One for All, it wasn't until he was done using it that his bones were broken and then that his body physically hurt. But in this power with Black Whip, with it manifesting, it hurt in the moment. And that's like, I applaud Deku's voice actor in this because he really conveyed like the help, hurry, get out of the way. I don't know how to control this. There was a moment earlier on with Monama's talking to Shinso about his power not being suited to be a hero's. And there was a line that was left out of the anime that is in the manga that I thought was really good. And it's someone in the background telling Monoma, it says, "You're a hero that can't do anything on his own." And I thought that was really sad and kind of like, oh, because, I mean, Monoma's whole quirk is that he has to copy someone. And it's kind of like Shinso's quirk. Shinso's quirk is useless unless somebody responds. And Monoma's quirk is useless unless he has something to copy that he can touch. So it's like, dang. Like that connection between Shinso and Monoma was really cool. I was like, oh, okay. All right. But I didn't want to say it in the general discussion because it's a spoiler from the manga. I really like also something that's an anime only instance in this is that Nana and Gran Torino, we see a little moment of Gran Torino's younger self and Nana's younger self when they're talking about, she's like, oh, I saw the vestige in a dream. And he said, it's not time yet. And that's all she knew. And then All Might's like, I didn't see anything. And so I really like that they showed us her physically there. Because in the manga, it's just a word bubble. It's just the conversation that Nana and Gran Torino have is just a word bubble. And it appears right before Black Whip awakens or right as it's awakening in Deku. As you all know, if you've watched my soapbox episode about My Hero Academia, you know that I ship Gran Torino and Nana so hard. I'm like, they're canon. It's love, damn it. You can't convince me otherwise. They're a couple. So I'm like, yeah, I love seeing that moment of them all together. And then Tartarus. All for one. Ooh, that whole, everything is coalescing together. It's all connecting, like the powers and everything. It's like, oh my God, it's so good. And I like that we got Tartarus at this point in the story. At the time when I was reading the manga, it didn't make sense. But now it definitely does. That, because when you're reading the manga, you're like, oh, we're cutting back to Tartarus. And we're talking about All for One. And he's talking about feeling nostalgic and hearing his brother's voice. And at the time you think, okay, well, that's connecting to Deku, Black Whip awakening in Deku. That connects to that. But looking back and knowing what we're doing this season, Horikoshi, you madman. It's foreshadowing My Villain Academia because the people in Tartarus are talking about these escaped fugitives, which is the League of Villains that they can't find. And it's like, this is just setting up My Villain Academia before it even starts. It's Horikoshi just sprinkling in the preview of this is what's going to happen. And I love that we're going to touch next week on Aizawa. From the preview, it looks like we're touching on Aizawa training Shinso. I really hope, because Aizawa's arc, where him and Present Mike talk to Kurogiri, I don't think we're getting it this season. I think it's going to be next season when we get to it. But them talking to Kurogiri, I really, really hope that they find some way to weave in the flashback from Vigilantes. I really hope that they do, because that's one of my favorite storylines in this whole series, is the storyline of Aizawa, Present Mike, and Shirakumo, which is Kurogiri, who's been kind of no-mufied into Kurogiri. And so I'm really hoping we get that. But yeah, this was all just a nice little subtle foreshadowing by Horikoshi being like, we're going to talk about the villains soon. I know we're doing Class 1 and Class 1B, but soon the villains are going to come back up. That's why we had that whole montage of Shigaraki, so don't forget about them. It's like Horikoshi's reminding us, like, don't forget the villains of the series because they're about to have a giant arc just for them. And it's like, oh, God. I'm so excited. But yeah, I mean, this episode, I was really surprised we got to Black Whip already, and we got Banjo talking to Deku, which I'm glad they didn't drag it out, because we've drug out enough this season. I'm glad they're at least keeping on pace with the episode. But yeah, and then, so the other quirks that we know about, if you're a manga reader, we know that it goes Black Whip, and then Float, which is Nana's quirk. We get Float next, and then we obviously have Smokescreen, which is the fourth user's. and we just got the reveal of Danger Sense, which is I think the 5th users, and then we just got the 5th quirk in the manga, which is like this martial arts move, like exerting energy through martial arts sort of technique that we've not fully got explained yet. It's just kind of introduced in the last chapter. And then we still have the 2nd user with his quirk. We don't know what his quirk was yet. I will say, I was going to bring this up in the main discussion, and I'm like, that's kind of spoilery, so I don't want to talk about it then, but I find Deku and All For One, the parallels between them, very fascinating. Very, very fascinating. Because if you think about it, Deku's getting all these quirks he's using at the same time. While it's part of One For All, if it reminds me of anything, it reminds me of All For One. And it's like Deku is kind of, his powers are kind of mimicking, it's a little bit like All For One. Now, All For One can steal from different people and interchange those quirks and use them whenever he wants to. And he can dispose of a quirk and pick up a new one, whereas Deku is stuck to just these 6 quirks. But, it's still, the parallels between him and All For One are so similar. And there's a moment in the manga in the recent chapters where Deku's like, don't worry, I will help solve all of our problems. And in my head, I'm going, that's really reminiscent of All For One, because All For One's like, no, if you just let me control everything, I'll fix all of our problems. And Deku saying that, I think it's chapter 311, him saying something similar, I was like, ooh, Deku, you're so similar. Like I said before, I don't believe All For One is Deku's father. I don't. I think they're related. That's my headcanon theory. So that strikes me as very interesting. The animation in this episode was really good, like especially again conveying Deku's pain and his struggle. Like it really hurt to watch because you're like, damn, it was just so hard. And then Ochaco coming in and saving him and Ochaco, she saved the day here. Shinso definitely helped, and then we have the idea of this power awakening and growing inside of Deku. It's just, I'm excited to see all the users animated. Like, Banjo looks awesome. He looks so badass. Like, I love his appearance, and it makes sense for him using Black Whip. Like, it's so fun. I cannot wait to see when they're in the Endeavor Hero Agency, Deku. And we saw in the preview, I did remember this from the manga, where he uses Black Whip to grab the barrels to knock Shinso out. And I love it. It's like Spider-Man. It's so cool. And Deku's just sitting there like, oh my god, I have all this power now. I'm freaked out. And I love the animation of Deku stumbling back and then immediately going back to her and looking concerned. And then Monoma's like, we're still fighting. It's like, such good stuff. Such good stuff. This was a great episode. This was a lot of fun. I'm very excited. Episode 11, we're going to go in chapter 214. I'm really excited next episode to see. I don't remember how this match concludes, honestly. Part of me wants to think it's a draw, but I don't know. I can't remember. So it'll be fresh to me to figure out how this all ends because I don't remember. But yeah, I'm excited. And then we're getting closer and closer to My Villain Academia. It's getting closer all the time. So yeah, I'm excited, y'all. I can't wait to see what happens, but I hope y'all enjoyed this reaction. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. But yes, next week, episode 11 of My Hero Academia. In the meantime, have a wonderful week. Stay safe, take care, and I'll talk to y'all again soon. Bye.